Okay, we skipped the book of Obadiah to go to Jonah because it had some teachings in it that helped us with Thanksgiving. And so I want to go back to Obadiah this morning. Obadiah is the minorest of the minor prophets. Not minor in its message, they're just minor because they're shorter than the other prophets. The final 12 books of the Old Testament are called the minor prophets, and Obadiah is the shortest one of those minor prophets. I got to get to it myself. I still am not used to the little pages for my big fingers in my new Bible, which is amazing. Every time I read in it, there's somebody else's favorite verse highlighted in there. Thank you, Jennifer. It wasn't just you, I know, but you put it together, I think, somehow. Obadiah was his name means servant of the Lord, and he was commissioned by the Lord to prophesy against the lineage of Esau, and it's because of the pride of their heart. We need to know that right away to be able to interpret everything that's going on in this book and also in our own life. We'll see quickly when our pride gets the best of us, it's why nothing ever goes right, because God really hates that. He hates pride. Proverbs chapter 6, he mentions 7 things that are an abomination to him, and pride is the first one on the list. And so don't ever forget that. Pride is what brings every contention in our life. And the lineage of Esau, which is called Edom, I looked all over to try to figure out why it changed to Edom. And the only thing I can figure out why they changed it from Esau to Edom is because it really doesn't roll very well to say the Esauites. So they took another word that means the same thing as Esau and used it. And it also, there's more to it than that. God had a plan to show the future, because Edom has a meaning to it that's a little extra than what Esau did. And that's why he changed the name. And the verse 1 says, "The vision of Obadiah, thus saith the Lord God concerning Edom. We have heard a rumor from the Lord, and an ambassador is sent among the heathen. Arise ye, and let us rise up against her in battle." Edom was, as we know, the brother of Jacob. And even though Esau had kind of made amends with Jacob, the later generations of the Edomites, the sons of Esau, they looked back at how they lost their birthright. And they were angry that Jacob stole their birthright. When we know that Jacob didn't have to, it wasn't hard for Jacob to take it, because Esau just handed it over. He would rather have his flesh satisfied than to have his spiritual life in order, which a lot of us do a lot. Esau lost his birthright, his firstbornship, so to speak, because of his flesh. He wanted what his flesh wanted that day, that moment. Nothing else mattered. Who cares about my spiritual life? I need this right now. And he lost his birthright. And so even though Esau kind of made amends with Jacob by Jacob's humbleness, if you remember, Jacob came and bowed before him 7 times. That's a picture of humility, guys. At number 7. Perfect humility. Jacob went to Esau and apologized to him and gave him all these gifts, even though it was God's plan for Jacob to have the birthright. Jacob still did what was right in the eyes of Esau, and their relationship was better. And they even buried their uncle Ishmael together. And so they had a relationship there at the end. But the descendants of Edom saw that happened back then, saw what they could have had and was taken from them, and they've hated Israel ever since. And anytime anybody would ever go against Israel, it didn't matter what army it was, Edom would go with them. What Edom would do is they would do whatever they could to help the people taken over, and they would go down to the outskirts of the villages of the Jews, and they would await the Jews that would flee from the destruction that was happening to their land. The Edomites would be there to kill them as they came out and running. That's the hate that Edom had within them. Verse 3 tells what it was. But verse 2, let's read that. Behold, I have made thee small among the heathen. Thou art greatly despised. Why? Verse 3. The pride of thine heart hath deceived thee, thou that dwellest in the clefts of the rock, whose rock city, it was carved into the rocks. They had this pride, nobody's going to bring us down. Even our houses are built out of rock. It's the same thing that Moses talked about in Deuteronomy 32 when he talked about the enemies of Israel, and he said, their rock is not as our rock. Our rock, capital R, is Christ. Their rock is of the vine of Sodom. You know the vine of Sodom? Pride. Pride. So they built this city. They hewed these houses into the rocks. You ever seen Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade? You see the city of Petra in that movie. That's it. They carved temples and such into the rocks. I mean, it's enough to house, some say, 1 million people. Which they believe, the commentators believe, and it really does say it in the book of Isaiah, that the people of Israel will go there during the tribulation time and be protected there from all armies. That's where they're going to go and be protected. This was Edom's city. Their pride, they were so lifted up in pride, and they used that pride against God's people, that God ended up destroying them completely. He made them the least of all the heathen. Thou art greatly despised, it says. The pride of thine heart hath deceived thee. Can anybody be honest this morning and say the pride of your heart has deceived you at times? So let's not put Edom in a category here by itself and act like they're so much worse than everybody else. Let's see the pieces of them, the parts of them that we see in our own lives, and recognize what needs to be worked on in our lives. Let's do that this morning. Obadiah was commissioned by the Lord to prophesy against this people. And 100 years later, Babylon destroyed it. All the cities. There was Bozrah, there was Teman, and Petra, which is called Selah in the Old Testament. Those 3 cities were destroyed by the Babylonians. Even though Edom wanted to help the Babylonians, they snookered them because they wanted their property, and they destroyed them. And the people of Edom that were left, very few, scattered into the surrounding nations of Jordan. Moab and Ammon and Gaza. That was where their lineage ended up. And there was very few. They had a lot of trouble. Even nobody could ever point to, there's Edomites living over there. They just kind of was in between everything. And when the second time that the temple was destroyed in 70 A.D., when the temple was being destroyed by the Roman Titus, when he came in there to destroy it, the Edomites show up again. There's like 20,000 of them left in the world. And they show up at this time to kill Israelites fleeing Jerusalem. Now, Jesus told them, when you see this taking place, flee into the mountains. The Edomites were going down. This is Josephus that wrote about this, the Jewish historian. He wrote about all this. And every one of those, there was 20,000 of them that died during that time, the Edomites. They went down there to kill Israel, fleeing into the mountains, and they were burned up in the fires that were burning up Israel. It's an amazing story. And we don't take Josephus above Scripture, but it just adds to and confirms what God said here. He's left them very small at this time. There are very few of them. And then later on in Obadiah, it says He's completely going to do away with them. Completely. Their name, you won't be able to point to anyone and say, well, that's an Edomite. Well, there's a lot of people that try to. They say the Roman church is Edom. They say the nation of Rome is where the Edomites ran to, and it's because they hate Rome, and this is a good way to make that where you can hate them even more because they're Edomites, because they hate Israel. But it really doesn't matter about that, because this book is not written to get us to go through genealogies and try to find who Edom is. This book is written to show us why Edom fell. Because we all have the same thing dwelling right here. Edom actually means red man. Red man. Not the chewing tobacco. It has to do with the pride of the eyes. The going after blood. That I was owed this, I deserve this, and they took it from me, and I'm going to get it back with every ounce of my being. That's what red man means. You've seen someone with red eyes? They've got vengeance in their mind. And even though Esau was not like that, his descendants was. Ishmael was not like his descendants are. Ishmael had a good relationship with Isaac in the end of his days. But the pride that's in mankind sprouted back up. And they saw what took place. And we're sons of Abraham too. We should get the promise. And that conflict has been going on ever since. It's because of pride. Pride. It doesn't want us to look for Edom today. It wants us to realize it's a mystical kingdom. It's a mystical nation. It's everywhere that pride reigns. So this is not just talking about Edom being destroyed, that nation. It's talking about anyone who is filled with this pride will be the same as Edom was. Completely destroyed and out of remembrance. Completely. And this should say to us, if there's any seed of pride in us whatsoever, if we have any of that vengeance in us about what somebody has done to us and we just can't get over it and this bitterness is overtaking us, that should make us want to say, I want to get rid of that. I don't care what anybody's done to me. My life is about now going forward, serving God, serving others, and get that stuff behind you. Because nothing in your life will prosper. Especially not your spiritual life. It has to do with the inner man being red, full of vengeance, for pride's sake. The attitude of, I deserve that and they took it from me, I'm going to get even. Verse 13 and 14, we'll skip to there to try to get through this. Verse 13 and 14, this is God talking about what they shouldn't have done and why the judgment's coming upon him. First of all, it was their pride of their heart. Verse 13 says, Thou shouldest not have entered into the gate of my people in the day of their calamity. Yea, thou shouldest not have looked on their affliction in the day of their calamity, nor have laid hands on their substance in the day of their calamity. So they also stole stuff from them. Verse 14, Neither shouldest thou have stood in the crossway to cut off those of his that did escape. That confirms what Josephus said, that they would go and wait for the Israelites to run scared from the destruction going on in Jerusalem, and they would kill them as they were coming out, trying to flee. Neither shouldest thou have delivered up those of his that did remain in the day of distress. Not only did they kill them, but a lot of them wanted to see them tortured, so they'd capture them and they'd take them back to Rome and watch them be tortured by Rome. Boy. Verse 15 says, For the day of the Lord is near upon all the heathen. As thou hast done, it shall be done unto thee. Thy reward shall return upon thine own head. For as ye have drunk upon my holy mountain, so shall all the heathen drink continually. Yea, they shall drink, and they shall swallow down, and they shall be as though they had not been. It means they're going to disappear. There's no future for the heathen. There's no future for the prideful. Do you realize that you can't even be saved without realizing your pride needs to be dealt with? It's the first thing that has to come into you is a seed of humility. Just a little seed of it. It's what Jesus talked about when he said the mustard seed faith can move mountains. Just a little bit of humility is all it takes to save your neighbor. You imagine what a lot of humility will do? Like Jesus, it saved the world. Complete, total humility by the one that shouldn't have been humble in our eyes. We say he should have destroyed everybody and started over because that's how we think. We want vengeance. We want justice. Unless it's against us. If we've done something we know is wrong, we want everybody to be gracious with us. And just all Wayne. All Vicky. But if somebody else, it's, they did this. It's horrible. We magnify it. That's the pride, and it's not even a seed. We're made of it. We're made of pride. We have to, every day of our lives, kill that. Put that down by reading the Word every day. Paul said, I die daily. Every day he had to remember who he was and who God wanted him to be. And set out. Before his feet left the house, he had died to his flesh. He had made God's mercies new to him, and he left being merciful. He was going to be merciful to whoever. They beat him to death more than once. How many times are you going to let somebody beat you to death? Not even once. Not even. Unless we've got it figured out. Unless we realize, hey, let them beat me to death. That means I'm going to be with Jesus. Then you're able to do that. But the only times that is even possible is during extreme times of persecution. Really. We don't even realize that we are prideful most of the time until some calamity hits in our life. Oh, we're humbling ourselves then. You know, we go through life and maybe only pray at meals, and we don't even really think about God and others. But when calamity hits our life, boy, and I can attest to this because when my son died, I was never more prayerful in all my life. And that changed my prayer life from that point on, because God wants that before calamity strikes. God wants that every day when you wake up, to die to your flesh. And that takes prayer. That takes an acknowledgement of who you are every day. Why do you think we're commanded to confess our faults one to another? You know, why do I stand up here and tell you how worthless I am week after week? It keeps you humble. It keeps you humble. Confess your faults one to another. That's how you remain equal with everybody and never glorify yourself up above somebody else. Because everybody knows the problems that you have. And believe me, you don't want to tell everybody every problem that you have. Just the ones that equalize you with everybody. Confess those faults to one another. This Edom has to do with the inner man, the red man. The one inside of you that you have to calm down all the time. It always wanting to rear its ugly head because of what people do to you, how they treat you. And let's go to the New Testament now. I want to finish up with the New Testament in Hebrews chapter 12. Hebrews chapter 12, this is hearkening back to Edom. Hebrews chapter 12. We were in Hebrews 9 in Sunday school this morning. Hebrews chapter 12. I mean, this whole chapter really spells out what we've been talking about already. About how we're supposed to be as the church. It's even called the church of the firstborn. There's a reason why he uses that phrase. Esau wanted his position, the descendants of him, wanted their position as the firstborn. Jacob stole it. And we're called the church of the firstborn in Hebrews chapter 12. But look at this. Let me read this fast. Chapter 12, wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which doth so easily beset us. That's pride. That's the sin that besets us. It's the only one. Every other sin that's committed is because of pride, because of the love of our own flesh and our own desires. He goes through chapter 11 and tells all the people that had faith and they humbled themselves before God and they just obeyed God. And so he says, we got all these witnesses, all these people to look to. Look at how they humbled themselves. They believed God when it was unbelievable. They believed Him. For Abraham, it was accounted unto him for righteousness. He was a saved man before the law was ever even given. But they swallowed their pride. They put their pride away so that they could follow God. And he says, wherefore, because of that, we have all these witnesses to look to. Do like they did. Lay aside every weight. Anything that would come in the path of your spiritual life. Get it away from you. Even death. Wouldn't you rather die than to give over to the devil? These guys, that was Abraham, and even his wife is talked about, they exhibited humility. And he says, do the same. Lay aside every weight and the sin which doth so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us. It's a race of humility. Peter says, be clothed with humility above anything else Clothe yourself with humility. Fight for it every day of your life. Before you leave the house every morning, beg God to help you be humble. Beg Him. Be clothed with that humility, or we'll end up like Edom. I say all the time when I do funerals, or when I'm talking about doing funerals, what do you want people to say about you when you're laying in your casket? You want them to kind of not really remember anything, or, really remember what sacrifices you made in your life. Edomites are not remembered in anything good they ever did. What about you? What's going to be said at your funeral? You're going to be like Edom or like Jesus? Sacrifices on everybody's mind that you've made. Listen, this race that's set before us, it may not be an easy race, but it is a sure race. It's a sure race that you will win. You can win this race. If you enter this race, you are going to win, even if you die. Even if you die running it. Verse 2 says, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before Him endured the cross. It wasn't He wanted to have all the pain. He didn't want to go through the torture. He saw what was going to take place afterward. The joy that was set before Him, that's what got Him going. And that's what we need to do. That's why John tells us to look for His Son from heaven. And you purify yourself when you know Jesus is going to come in that eastern sky any minute. It purifies us. For consider Him that endured such contradiction of sinners against Himself. He was not a sinner, but He took on the debt that sinners had. Such a contradiction of sinners against Himself, lest ye be wearied and faint in your minds. Ye have not yet resisted unto blood, striving against sin. He's saying you're not losing anything striving against sin. You're just living in it. Ye have not resisted unto blood. Verse 5, and ye have forgotten the exhortation which speaketh unto you as unto children. My son, despise not thou the chastening of the Lord, nor faint when thou art rebuked of Him. For whom the Lord loveth, He chasteneth, and scourgeth every son whom He receiveth. If ye endure chastening, God dealeth with you as with sons. For what son is he whom the Father chasteneth not? But if ye be without chastisement, whereof all are partakers, all people that have come under the banner of God's family, that have claimed Him as their own, become saved, been baptized into Him, chastisement is your future. When you get out of line, you're going to get spanked. He says, if they're not getting that, then ye are bastards and not sons. If there's no chastisement that ever comes your way when you do wrong, of course, you may not even be one of those in that family. You might not ever realize what has to take place in your heart and mind. You might have just said, yeah, I want heaven one day. Let's do that thing. Let's go up here and get baptized, and that's it. There hasn't really been a time in your life when you've had to say, I'm tired of doing things my own way. I can see the pride that keeps me down, and I want to humble myself before the mighty hand of God. That's what the Bible tells us to do. Humble yourself before the mighty hand of God. That little ounce of humility changes his complete mind. You're not under condemnation anymore. Even though you zig and zag and struggle the whole rest of your life, that one time of humility when you say, you're sovereign, I'm not, I can't do it, you can, here I am. Salvation. Then every day of your life, you might be chastened because of not doing right. I don't know. I know my dad, he chastened me but it was for His own comfort. He chastened me because He didn't want to hear screaming. He didn't want to be, He didn't want to have to sacrifice and keep getting up and doing things. He chastened me and all men. That's the way we are. That's the way we are. And it even says it in this passage, that's the way man is. He chastises for that reason. Verse 9, furthermore, we have had fathers of our flesh which corrected us, and we gave them reverence. Shall we not much rather be in subjection unto the Father of spirits and live? For they, being the fathers on earth, verily for a few days chastened us after their own pleasure. I know what that's like. I don't like people thinking about my son, boy, he's a spoiled brat. Because that's a reflection on me, right? My daughter is very emotional. Very emotional. Sometimes it's embarrassing. And it makes me want to chasten her so that I look good. You know what I'm saying? I try not to. I really do. I used to be that way. I'd try not to do that. I want it to be for their benefit. I tell my wife all the time, look at it this way. When I have to spank them, you know how moms are. They're like, oh, gosh. I say, honey, look at it this way. If they're running out in front of a car and you say, stop, and they don't stop, whose fault is it that car hits them? Well, that clears it right up right then. Till the next time. Oh, God. And I feel it too. I don't want to spank them anymore. I hate it. There was a time when I didn't mind it, especially when I spanked you, Jason. It was okay then because it was my benefit. I didn't want to have to get on to you every little bit. I wanted you to just obey me. But it was because of the reflection that it put on me. I wanted people to know that, that I can control things. I can do things this way, and I'm just some kind of a man. Not even realizing it, you see. It's my Father handed it down to me. I have it. It's taken a lot of years to show me that's not good motivation. Yes, you may have some good kids and they know how to work and make a living, but they'll never know how to love another. Mom, if it wasn't for you, I would never love another person ever. You showed me that love that God has. Without my mama, I wouldn't know that. And that's what brought me into God's kingdom, was my mama and her love. Now, it's not that fathers can't have that. They can. My wife will tell you her dad was who brought her that way because mama was the one that done the chastising. There has to be one and the other. That's what balances it out. God's that perfect balance. He loves us and He chastens us. So I try to give that to my kids, even in myself. But I'm not around all the time. I have to work a lot. But as much as I'm around, I try to be that balanced one. I only want to have to do that capital punishment, they call it, when it's absolutely necessary. God says here, verse 11, now no chastening for the present seemeth to be joyous, but grievous. And it is. Every ounce of chastening I've taken from the Lord has hurt really bad. And every spanking that I got from my dad when I was younger hurt really bad. That helped me to recognize it when God was spanking me. And the more that I learn about God, the more that I see that it's love. Oh, it's dripping with grace. It's dripping with love. The same way that I want my kids not to run out in front of that car and stop when I say stop. That's what God was like with us. He did it for our good. Did you see that in the verse? For they verily for a few days chastened us after their own pleasure, but He for our profit, that we might be partakers of His holiness. Now, no chastening for the present seemeth to be joyous, but grievous. Nevertheless, afterward it yieldeth the peaceable fruit of righteousness unto them which are exercised thereby. The peaceable fruit of righteousness is humility. That's it. Verse 12. Wherefore lift up the hands which hang down, and the feeble knees, and make straight paths for your feet, lest that which is lame be turned out of the way, but let it rather be healed. Listen to verse 14. Please, if you don't get anything else, get this morning. Follow peace with all men, and holiness, without which no man shall see the Lord. If you don't follow peace with all men, how will they ever see the Lord in you? If you're a man always trying to take control of everything, and you got this pride in you and want to be looked at as this guy that can do all this stuff, and he can control a crowd and all this stuff, how is God exalted out of any of that? Follow peace with all men, and holiness, without which no man shall see the Lord, looking diligently lest any man fail of the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness springing up trouble you, and thereby many be defiled. You realize by your pride and arrogance you can defile many people that look to you for spiritual guidance, and now you're full of pride and screaming and hollering and angry and mad. What you do is you show them how they should react. You show them it's okay to be that way. That defiles them, you see. Then verse 16 says, lest there be any fornicator or profane person as Esau, who for one morsel of meat sold his birthright. One morsel of meat, he sold out his spirituality completely. One act of the flesh. Verse 17 says, for ye know how that afterward, when he would have inherited the blessing, he was rejected. For he found no place of repentance, though he sought it carefully with tears. One act of pride can change everything. Not in just your life, but the lives of your kids that are watching, the lives of everybody in the sphere of influence that you're in. I was telling somebody just last night, said you can't ever do away with pride. It's always going to be there. It's going to rear its ugly head somewhere. And that gives us the opportunity to apologize. That gives us the opportunity to go to them and say, I'm sorry that I acted that way. That's not who I want people to see me as. Please forgive me. You talk about God getting glory. That gives God glory. So that's what it meant by lift up the feeble knees, lift up the hands that hang down. There's reasons for this. When these times happen in our life, they're for a witness that God dwells in us. Because when the pride of man has its way, then you come along and you humble yourself. I've had people say to me, what? Why are you apologizing to me? And by that point, I realize I've let myself be shown, and I know I can calm it then. The pride comes out. That's our default mechanism a lot of times. It just comes out of us. But then there comes the opportunity to show God in our lives. I'm sorry. What about you this morning? Do you have somebody you need to tell sorry? This is your chance. If it's God, You do it during this time. You got anything prepared? Good. We'll let him play one verse or two. We'll see where it goes from there. And everybody stand and let's get alone with God. And if there's anything in your heart with anybody that you need to say sorry to today to get that cleared out between you and God, let's do that this morning.